Katie Marchetti, thank you for being here on Signature Required today.
Thanks for having me.
I have so many different things to ask you about. You are a cool human being, and I want to just read a couple of the things that you're involved with. Community Foundation of Middle Tennessee, you're the Vice President of Philanthropic Services there. Voices for a Safer Tennessee, Board of Directors and co-founder there. Fisk University, Board of Trustees there. And probably on top of it all, you're a unicorn born and raised right here in Tennessee.
I am, proudly.
I have a lot to find out about your story, but before I go through all of that, just give me the intro of who Katie is, tell me some of your story, and then we'll go into all these things and see what you're up to.
I'll do my best to not make a short story long, but yes, I was born in Nashville and left around age 18 for university, went back to Tennessee, UT Law for, obviously, law school, got my JD there. Practiced law for a while, and financial crisis hit, was the first of a few watershed moments in my career where I thought, is this really what I want to be doing? And so I moved to marketplace companies. By this point, I was in London, and switched to a new company, which we grew from, it's a company called GLG, which we grew from about 15 people to about 950 across Europe, Middle East, and Africa by the time I left. And in the meantime, met my husband, had 3 little girls who are now 7, 9, and 11, and they drive me nuts and are the joy of my life, depending on the minute that you ask me. And we moved back to Nashville about 5 years ago, just before the pandemic. And then I had kind of moved to finance at that point. In the meantime, doing nonprofit work, philanthropic work in my free time, non-existent free time, I guess. I'm like, shout out to all the working parents out there. And then had gone through the pandemic, yet another, watershed moment, again and again, trying more acutely to focus on how do I kind of make money and make the world a better place, every day that I wake up. And it kind of had a real moment of awareness in March of last year after the mass shooting at Covenant. I was working at a venture capital firm at the time, and resigned, and took the last year to help prop up Voices for Safer Tennessee. Worked a lot with the Fisk board, and that year of kind of taking a break from the commercial world introduced me to a lot of incredible people around Tennessee, and we'll go into that in a lot more detail, but they're just some of the most inspirational, just ingenuity abounding people that are in our backyard, doing great things and trying to make our backyard better. So that landed me fairly recently with the Community Foundation as head of philanthropic services. So now my career is aligned with my passion, and trying to make the world a better place, trying to make it better for my kids when they get to be my age.
For your babies.
My babies.
Love that. We have 3 girls too.
Oh, you do?
Yes. So they're 13, 11, and 10.
Oh my gosh.
Almost 12. Our 11 is almost 12. And then we have a 4-year-old boy, but we had 3 girls back to back. So I understand that feeling. And they go to school across the street from Covenant. So that was a watershed moment, transformative moment in our lives.
I think it was for a lot of people.
Yeah. It shook us all.
Mm-hmm.
So what brought you back to the States from being in London? I mean, that's a huge life change, cultural change.
Yeah.
You meet your spouse over there. What convinces you to come to London or come back to the States?
Come back to Nashville. So I think a few things. We have, this is, it was kind of a multi-layered decision, but one of the reasons, my sister has cystic fibrosis, and so she, kind of watching her go through the different health scares and hospitalizations, that was something where I thought, okay, I really do want to be close. Our family is crazy close, and we are in and out of each other's houses and lives all the time, to the point where my husband said, we need to talk about boundaries. And I said, I don't understand what you mean. Actually, when we moved house just recently, we had to give our keys to our old house to the new owners. And I said to my husband, we need to give our keys over. And he said, oh, well, you need to ask your parents. And I said, oh my God, that's right. We don't have any keys. My parents have the keys to our house because we never locked our door. So that just shows, it's just like a revolving door. It's a big Italian family. Anyway, but so point being, family was a huge decision there. Being near Margaret, she's doing great, by the way. There's been a groundbreaking drug called Trikafta that, anyway, we'll talk about venture philanthropy at some point, but which was incredible, changed her life. So she's doing incredibly well now. But being close to her, being close to my family with the, 3 kids, I call it the Jenga tower of childcare, just got more and more difficult in London.
That sounds familiar.
Yes, I'm sure.
Pretty sure we were just talking about that right before we came in here.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you can have those conversations of who has the more important job or, thing to do only so many times until it's just like, okay, we're looking to gift horse in the mouth here. I've got this huge family that would love to help. So, and the third reason was that we had been living, as many people in, big cities do, a fairly transient life. I think when we had moved to London, or when I had moved to London, I said, I'll only be there for a year. And a year turned into 2, turned into 5, turned into 7. And then I ended up being there for about 15 years and never thought I would be, but enjoyed every minute of it. And I think that was also played into the mentality because you think, oh, I'm not going to be here forever. Let's just do everything. And the kids, we traveled all the time. We went to museums and we still do that. But, being in a place that you probably won't be forever. But I think we did get to a point where we thought, okay, we need to fish or cut bait at this point. Like, are we going to stay here and put down roots or move to where we want to be at the end of the day? And one other aspect to it, and I know it's a long answer to a short question, but with the kind of watching the U.S. change and really polarize worried me, and seeing it from afar with the political landscape. When you're living in a city that's not your own, you can kind of hover above and laugh at things. Not laugh, but you can observe things like Brexit and there was a Scottish referendum at the time, the Euro crisis, the wars, and say, ooh, wow, stinks for them.
Yeah.
Wow, that was a dumb decision or whatever. But it's not your people. And when all of a sudden you see things, that are happening in Tennessee or in the U.S., that is my people. That is my backyard. And I really felt compelled to come back and really dig in. And I think I started doing that from the minute that we landed, but it's something that, if you grow up in a beautiful place like Nashville and you really thrive being part of, an integrated community, that you miss that when you don't have it. No matter how much nonprofit work you do in your free time, it's not your backyard. So.
And how old were they when you guys moved back?
One just turned 3, 4, and 6.
Okay, so
So
just a little before they really could have it ingrained in that accent. Okay.
But we stay connected to, their lives in London. We go back every summer. Thank you, British Airways, for the direct London Nashville flight.
Yes.
And we go to see their grandparents, obviously, each summer and every other Christmas. Those flights with 3 kids. Woo. A little pricey.
It's one of the amazing things that has been long overdue for the Nashville airport, but having that direct flight from Nashville to London, I've met more people that have never been able to go international. It's never been in the books for them, but that flight is actually not brutal. It's like 5.5, 6 hours, something like that, and it leaves late at night. By the time you get to London, it's morning time, you're adjusted, and you get to see international for the first time.
True. And fingers crossed that we're going to get more of them at some point in time, some more directs to Europe, because I love that Nashville is becoming this little, base of international business, and it has caught the eye. I will tell you a funny story about London. The first time when I had landed there, I would get in, black taxis, like your standard, what you picture in London, the red buses, black taxis, and I would get in the taxis, and the people would say things like, "Oh, Nashville." They're like, right, Elvis. And I said, no, well, it's Tennessee. Okay. They're like, right, Nashville. Do you guys have indoor plumbing there? It was some of those. And one of our last taxi rides before we moved, it was in a taxi. It just shows like the the growth of Nashville and the awareness of people around the world, the taxi was labeled Visit Music City. It was, it was actually advertising the city. And sure enough, the driver, he's like, I specially chose this. I've been to Nashville 5 times. I love it. Like,
Wow.
the country music fans and the general just music fans, full stop, around Europe, they know of Nashville now, and it
Let's
makes
go
me
Tennessee.
makes me so proud.
Yeah.
Yes.
Jack Daniels, country
Jack
music.
Daniels,
I've been
yep.
amazed traveling international. Jack Daniels
Oh my God, their
is
branding.
insanely popular.
Yep.
Insanely popular.
And they have beautiful, those black and white ads. And,
Yeah.
it's gorgeous. But it made me feel like, that's right. Yeah, don't mock Tennessee. Like, we got a lot to offer.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Community Foundation,
Yes.
talk to me about what you do.
Yeah.
Kind of a generic name that I kind of don't know immediately just by hearing it what it does.
What it
So,
means.
Yeah.
So community foundations, it's such a good question. And because I didn't know either. And I knew of the community foundation when there were disasters, and the safest place to put your money to get to tornado victims or flood victims was the community foundation. I just remember, going online when I would read about these things and send money to the community foundation. So they've been around for about 100 years across the U.S., and it used to be kind of an offshoot of banks that would set aside an amount of money to disperse the community when they needed it. So disasters or particular segments of the population that needed it. So the IRS kind of stamped, approved these types of iterations called community foundations that are, it's a 501c6 from a tax perspective, but what they do is allow donors to basically park their money either with a direction or without a direction with the community foundation, and part of it, they can either, give it to the community foundation to, in a discretionary way, grant them out to the people that need it, or they can keep like a donor advised fund within the foundation and then rely on the community foundation to introduce them to the entities that need it, if that makes sense. So we have DAFs, endowments, family foundations, corporate care, corporate foundations, whatever it is. And so that's kind of what the community foundation does on the donor side. And on the community impact side, we work with over 1,600 nonprofits across Middle Tennessee, really understanding the need, what they're doing, what their plans are, who needs funds, and then connect ultimately the donors with the people that are in need of their resources, be they time, money, talent, whatever it is. So, and my role there, very recent, has been taking over the philanthropic services side. So I work primarily with the donors and the corporations who are wanting to set up funds that ultimately will get back to the backyard and the people who need it. All these people that are doing incredible work across Middle Tennessee. So, and it has grown really significantly. I think we're about 30 years old, and our new CEO, fairly new, is Hal Cato, who came from Thistle Farms.
Hal's amazing.
He is amazing. He is absolutely amazing. And so myself and the head of our community impact are both new. It's kind of new roles within the organization. So we have big plans. But what we really want to continue to be is just the central connector within the Middle Tennessee community to ensure that we are aware of all the need and we get the resources from the people that have it to the people who need it.
So do you vet these various nonprofits, or do you just do you have relationship managers with them? How do you make sure that they're actually doing what they're saying they're doing? Because that's so hard. We all want to make an impact, and then you see every Instagram out there of, we're doing this and we're doing that, but it's really hard to know.
It's such a good point. And we do, and so we are only able to grant to 501c3s. So they have to go through a certain, set of hoops to get the actual accreditation. But we also have a platform called Giving Matters where entities will register and they will, and they'll kind of prove, I say they're proof of concept, but basically they will kind of fill out a lot of information to kind of show what they do, and then we'll follow up as well. But especially before we give grants, we have quite a robust grant application process where we have committees that review, depending on what the entity is, if it's girls and women, it goes to our women's fund. If it's, animal welfare, that's the committee that deals with that. So, and we've actually rebooted the process as well. I think we've had a little bit of a, I don't know, struggle with transparency because it's such a big entity, and keeping the donors on one side and the nonprofits on the other, ne'er the two shall meet. We're kind of trying to break that system a little bit to educate the donors more about the needs of the community, but also understand from the nonprofits, to your point, who needs it most right now and who's just doing incredible work that we really want to lean into, to help them grow even more and do more good work in the community.
Because I would imagine there's the big guys, right? Like the Red Cross or Compassion International, or places doing things maybe not just in Middle Tennessee, but around the world.
Yep.
And they're vetted and everyone's looking at them very clearly. But the people that are going to change Middle Tennessee are the people that are in Middle Tennessee that see the issue.
Got that right. I'm like, clap, clap, clap.
But, but you don't know where to give it. So I have kids that are like, this person is homeless. I want to help this initiative in Nashville. Do I give to the person that I see selling a paper, or do I give to another cause? And I've actually, trying to raise aware children, really struggled to figure out how to parent that and where to direct them. So help me.
Yeah.
Teach
me.
me.
I think that's it's such a good point, because I have the same with my children. And even when we moved to the States, we're living in a really small flat in Notting Hill with 5 of us. It's about 1,000 square feet, which never felt cramped. It was perfect. It's exactly because we all can't get enough of each other. And then we moved to our house in Nashville, and it's bigger. And the kids said, "Who else is going to live here?" And I said, "No, it's just us." And they're like, and they still hadn't thought they'd cracked the code. They said, "Yeah, but who is living upstairs?" And I said, "No, this is all our house." And then my little Mimi, my second kid, said, "Oh, well, I saw John, the contributor salesman that we know. Why doesn't he come and live with us? You said he doesn't have a house." And again, guiding them through, here's what we can do, here's what we can't do. And sometimes I didn't have great answers for that. So one thing that we do via the Community Foundation is a lot of education events. So, for example, a lot of it involves kids, and you can get in touch with us for volunteer communities that are child-friendly, where we can connect you with, entities that your kids can go and learn about. All right, these are the organizations that we can work with to really make an impact. And post the Covenant shooting, there was a lot of education around how to deal with trauma with children and with crisis, and everyone was reading about how to talk to how to talk to your children about this. And more broadly, just welfare of the community, because you see increasingly inequity in the backyard and across the U.S. And one of my learnings was that children, one thing that helps them kind of feel more in control of the situation is just to do something. So again, with their hands, we had a bake sale, and we raised probably $500 for the Covenant families. But again, the kids were so happy that they could, mix the cookie dough and sell the cookies, because they felt like they were really contributing. So I think that the same thing with the backyard and raising kids, giving them a truly perspective that you are no better than anyone else, and no one's better than you, but you got to be aware of what else is happening here. When you, for instance, fiscal responsibility, we're doing an event next week with the Women's Fund where we're going to teach, kids, and older kids and younger kids, depending on which set they fall in, about fiscal responsibility. And like $20, when you go to Target and, and you want to buy the whatever gross doll that I wish they never got attached to, $20, that's a lot of money. But if you spend it here, you won't be able to spend it here. And remember, you also wanted to, give $5 to so-and-so on the street. Like,
opportunity cost.
It's opportunity cost. You're exactly right. And so again, just kind of educating them on the way and bringing them along, and not just saying, "Hey, I'll talk to you about that later." Finding a way to bring them into the conversation and letting them get their hands dirty and learn.
Does the Community Foundation have an input for a donor that isn't a family office, doesn't have $250,000, $1 million, $10 million? I could imagine that the mission may be, hey, we're going to do some research on nonprofits and let you know if you are a smaller dollar donor that these are great places to give. There's other organizations that already rate nonprofits.
Yep.
So do you all have in your role a conduit for individuals that may want to give $100 to something? Or is that something that's just not in alignment with your particular mission, but there's other places?
We can. So we do have portals where you can kind of give directly. Most importantly, you can learn about, the nonprofits that exist around Middle Tennessee. But we also have fund thresholds that are very small. So if someone, again, I've got the women's fund in my brain, but we have like a girls give opportunity where it's kind of engendering philanthropy across generations. So you could go with your mom and, set up a $2,000 fund where it's going to be your fund, and you guys get to talk about together, okay, where should we give, $200 this on Giving Tuesday, or however much money. So I think we're also trying to just bring people along. We just, at the end of the day, we're trying to make the tent bigger. This is not for the ultra high net worth individuals. It can be, but it's not just for them.
Okay.
That comprises, a good chunk of our fund holders, and the long tail of fund holders are the folks who they really want to give back, and they also want to ensure that they don't forget about it, because as the calendar year goes on and, expenses start piling up, if you have that money set aside, it kind of keeps you honest. Yeah.
And do you all pay for your operating costs like most nonprofits, that you're measured by, for every $100 given, that a certain amount goes towards the cause, and you all have a scrape to be able to cover your overhead costs?
That's right. So we have a rate. It's typically 1.25% that we use as our operating costs. So all the funds that are parked at the community foundation, we will take that to keep our staff of close to 50 people engaged. It is incredible the work that we do with the number of people that we have. The first thing, coming from the corporate world, I got there and I was like, we need to hire 30 more people, and we need an org chart, we need a better CRM system. And they're like, yeah. Sorry, we're still a nonprofit. So it's this odd balance between, revenue isn't really it's not a measure. I mean, it can't not be, because we want to keep the lights on and keep everyone employed. But we weigh it against impact. So the end goal is maximum impact for the community, and trying to strike that balance between no one's going to get rich running a community foundation, but can we maximize the impact of money out the door? And it's a mindset shift for me. I'm still struggling with it.
Yeah, and that ratio is a lot better than what you see of a lot of nonprofits that are rated highly, that, if you're looked at 95 cents of every dollar going towards it, you're, in the very, very best. So it sounds like, if I've heard that stat correctly, you might say 98.75 cents of every dollar is going towards the mission.
That's right. That's exactly right. And it's just a matter of, again, continuing to engage our donors, because sometimes in a way that's not, in their face, hey, can I tell you about the other 300 nonprofits that we have? So we're continuing to try to create innovative ways to engage the donors, get them educated on the needs of the community through all kinds of events, and let them chat with each other as well. Like, having events with family foundations, to help them understand how to engage the next generation. It's a perpetual problem, and so we've created some very interesting educational programs to say, okay, you're the grandfather, the grandmother, the matriarch or the patriarch. Let us set up a day at the zoo for you to watch your grandkids and how they think about giving money to the different animal causes, those types of things. So again, making sure that they really, they understand and remember that there's a lot of people that still need it in the community. So
that's so neat. I love everything that you're saying as a mom, as somebody that wants to cultivate givers out of our household. And it's something my parents were really intentional about with me throughout time. I bet you have some great stories, though, about people you've met, because everyone has a different giving mentality.
Yes.
And if you talk to my 10-year-old, she wants to save the squirrels that keep getting hit by cars across Middle Tennessee.
help.
There's so many.
Start a foundation for the squirrels.
For the squirrels. She's like, Mom, can we get a special bird feeder? Because they're in our bird feeder.
Oh my
but
God.
everyone has a different giving story of what
Yes.
breaks their heart. And so I bet you get to know people really intimately very quickly when you see what breaks their heart.
Oof. My God, I cry all the time now, so I'm going to try not to do it today.
I cry at commercials, so
every
it's
damn
fine.
day.
The
I used to
Publix
be-
commercial at Thanksgiving, I can't.
The Publix commercial, the Target, I mean,
Every
the list
time.
goes on and on. And I didn't used to cry, by the way. I remember crying one time because I was so at the end of my rope. I'd been up for 48 hours practicing. It was during practicing law, and I called my dad because of course, like when you're in crisis, you just call your dad. And I was, and my dad said, "Who is this?" And I said, "It's Katie." And he said, "My daughter doesn't cry. Who is this?" He said it tongue in cheek. He was trying to be funny, but anyway. So now becoming a mom, I think my whatever internal dam wall just kind of
Changes
left my body
everything.
with my children. But giving stories that have mattered. Every damn day, I see people who, despite every reason to kind of put a middle finger up to the world and just check out, they keep showing up every day. And the impact that they make, the thing that, well, multiple things wow me, but women in particular, single women, never mind if you're a black or brown woman, like you have everything kind of stacked against you in the States, and the incredible folks that are making such a difference. And it starts with, I'm going to take care of the 5 people, in my circle who I know have also, for instance, had breast cancer. And when they go to the hospital, they don't have childcare, so they miss their appointments. You know what? I'm just going to see within the 5 of us who can take care of kids when one of us has to go to an appointment. And then that grew and grew and grew. This is a real entity. And so now I think they have 1,000 clients that have used the service. Those types of things where it's you look at the backyard, and I had the same moment of recognition in the mirror with me again after the Covenant shooting, even though that wasn't the only time, but it's the one that comes to mind most recently, where I said that happened, and I said in my mind, I was like, we're leaving. Like I can't wake up to this reality every day. And 2 of the people that I started Voice for Safer Tennessee with, we started on this text, and it was just like, can we just all get on the phone and cry together? Let's all go meet. And I said, guys, I don't think I can handle this. And one of my friends, Erin Hafkinskill, who runs a think tank in Tennessee called Think Tennessee, she said, but did you see what the women in Iran just did to protest the police beating and eventual death of one of the women there for wearing her hijab inappropriately? She said they just didn't go to work one day, and it just had this massive impact on the community. What if we did something very visible to show, the government that we're here to stay? And that was the birth of Voices for Safer Tennessee and the Linking Arms event. That was kind of our end goal because we hadn't thought that far ahead. But it was a looking in the mirror moment and saying, if not me, then who? Like, what am I waiting for? Am I waiting for, the government to do it? They might get to it eventually. Am I waiting for what other nonprofit hasn't been, started? Like I'm a white woman that has enough resources to make a difference. Look in the mirror. That's who's going to make a difference. And the fact that I'm now connected with all these other people who have had those same moments. It was, you just kind of look around and say, I can partner with someone if there's an entity that's there that is really going to do the work, or, I can do it myself. So yes, so those moments of giving every day, and also seeing even in Europe, because I worked with a lot of international organizations, Women for Women, Vital Voices is another one, where they worked a lot with post-war victims, particularly women who are often victims of rape, and their whole family, have been murdered. Just these stories that you cannot even fathom. And again, their resilience to wake up every day and look to the people that have resources. And this is on a much more global scale, but we have a responsibility. Like, we are the richest country in the world. we have a responsibility to look to people even outside of our borders, in addition to in our backyard, to help. So yes, many crying times.
No.
You've mentioned covenant a handful of times, and I think that really serves well to talk about SAFER in Tennessee. And maybe I can just set up a framework for you for this part of our discussion, because I think it'll help provide a lens into helping me understand the initiative better.
Yep.
So if you take me, a born and raised Tennessean, so I've been raised in a family of gun owners. Carli and I own
not
several
alone.
guns ourselves, and we're Second Amendment people, but at the same time, our kids were across the street from Covenant. So Carli and I have a unique perspective in that for a couple brief moments when the Covenant shooting was happening, the Associated Press on Twitter released that it was St. Paul. That's where it was the shooting was at. And it was, without question, the most horrifying moment that Carli and I have ever shared as we drove over, only to, on the way, hear the correction over to Covenant. And so there are some mornings where, as a dad, I have these intrusive thoughts where I say goodbye to my kids going off to school, and I have an intrusive thought of saying,
What if
this is the last time I'm saying goodbye to them? And that feels deeply wrong to me to have to ask that question. But the framework that I struggle with and what I hope you can help me understand the framework for SAFER for Tennessee is that I struggle with how to balance the mindset that murder is already illegal, committing these crimes are illegal, and I'm not sure how legislative policies can change the actions of just horribly disturbed individuals. And that's the framework that I wrestle with. So I have some hard questions for you in that I hope to be able to best understand that. So can you take that framework as someone that is pretty new to hearing from someone in the SAFER camp? I mean, this is so much your mission to help me understand that.
Yep, sure. So first sentiment is within the people who started Voice for SAFER Tennessee, I think we were about 60% gun owners. So that is...
That's a stat not many people would say.
You are in, you're in familiar territory with our composition. So I think the first thing to note is that legislative policy very quietly has changed so significantly that we in Tennessee just kind of are just now waking up to it. So pivotal moments have been guns and trunks, what known as the Guns and Trunk Law, and I'm going to get the date wrong, but I think it was 2007, and I can correct that. But when that passed, the number of guns stolen out of cars and subsequently used for violent crimes have gone up exponentially. I think that there were maybe two or three, and before the law was passed, guns stolen out of trunks across the state of Tennessee. They just never assumed that they were there. We're up to 6,000 a year. And those guns, just because they're already involved in a crime of theft, they are subsequently used for, oftentimes for violent crimes.
The legislation said it's legal for you to store your guns.
It's legal for you to store your gun unlocked in your car.
And
so
it wasn't
you don't
prior.
have to safely secure it. That's right. And then permitless carry as well in 2021. Kind of broke a system that had been, it's very interesting because I'm thinking of Tory Johnson, who's a former DA, references this a lot. But before permitless carry was enacted, you had to have special permission from the sheriff's office to have a gun, and if to walk around with one, you had to have. There was a very specific training protocol you had to go through.
I went through a concealed carry myself, so I had a permit, all of that. Yeah.
Yes, and you remember kind of how robust the system was. It was similar to like getting your license to drive a car, and when that was removed, and then a lot of the background check legislation was removed so that you can buy a gun anywhere, online, at a gun show, the gun show exception. Guns are just more readily available, and they're naturally, it's like having if we took away the seatbelt law, the number of, injuries that would occur from, a car wreck would be significantly more deathly, than they currently are. So I think what we have done at Voices for Safer Tennessee is just called attention to how much the legislation has changed. So, and yes, mental health, making everyone feel like an included part of the community, exponentially important, and again, Sandy Hook promised us a lot with helping kids even from kindergarten. You look around, if you see someone who's feeling left out, you reach out to them, and if you feel like there's something wrong, you tell a teacher. There's some incredible age-appropriate protocol that's worth looking at on their website. But with Voice for Safer Tennessee, we're kind of focused on 3 tenets that are bipartisan in nature, to the point that, and I said this, I've said this so many times, but if you tick off people at both ends of the spectrum, you're doing something right. So, and that was something that hadn't really been tried before, where we as an entity were already bipartisan. I think we identified folks that were right-minded on both sides of the aisle in the initial kind of founding circle. And we had chats about, okay, well, what do you think we could get behind? What do you think we as Republicans or Democrats could really get behind? Not or, and we lost some of the things that, for instance, the right wanted on our tenant block, some that the left wanted on our tenant block. But ultimately, we came up with stuff where we said, actually, we can really defend this. We can, in all honesty, hand over heart, really stand by these tenants and say, yes, this is important. And they're very simple. It's safe storage for guns in your car and in your house, eliminating loopholes in background checks, and implementing temporary restraining orders for those who are posing immediate threat to themselves or those around them. So these are pretty standard, and I think it's something that, well, according to all the polls recently, 80% of Tennesseans stand behind, but we've gotten to the point where you're so polarized from a political perspective that there's no talking. It's just kind of shouting from both sides. So we have kind of militantly guarded this safe space in the middle where we can have conversations. And if you're there for a political soundbite or a Twitter blurb, it's just not the place for you. There is a place for you. This isn't it. We're here to kind of have the hard conversations and bring people together. And what we found is, oh my God, there are so many people in the middle. It is the overwhelming majority of our state who really care. Like the Tennesseans that are Tennesseans by birth, the Tennesseans that are new from California or New York or wherever the heck they're coming from, they are from England. Like I'm thinking of our friends stuff. They're all over the place. Yeah. From the pub. We love people coming from pubs. But they're aligned in the fact that they want this community to be safe for their kids and their neighbors, and that is, facilitating those conversations, whether it be in a church, in a park, in a school, wherever it is, just having people chat. And this is what I feel like one of our biggest victories has been with Voices for Safer Tennessee, has been destigmatizing conversations about guns. Like, it's okay to talk about it. And even the visibility with our yard signs, and I actually brought you 2 Voices for Safer Tennessee buttons, so you can wear it around and have people ask you questions about it. But we've prompted the conversation. We said, you know what? Actually, you think everyone thinks the same? They don't. Like, let's come and have a conversation about it. Just because I voted for this person for president, you voted for this person, it doesn't mean we don't align on the fact that our society should be a bit safer. So let's talk about it. And again, not trying to take away guns, firm Second Amendment believers on our board. And it's the U.S. It's probably not going anywhere anytime soon. So
I really appreciate the heart posture behind saying we want to destigmatize the conversation around it and say, let's get this out in the open. And a lot of it is first trying to understand where each of the camps are.
Yep.
And knowing a baseline, because that's one way that this conversation gets hijacked immediately, is that there are beginning assumptions around where someone else might be starting. And it may not at all be true. It may be true, and that's okay if it is true. It's just, let's not assume where someone is at before we're actually able to understand the facts and positions. So I have two really specific questions. Do you mind if I ask you those? Just because I'll
do my best.
Yeah, I really appreciate your openness and transparency through it all, because it's very educational for me. The first one is centered around covenant itself. The shooter acquired the weapons, as I understand it, and you can help fact check me, in a legal manner.
That's right. That's how I understand it, yes.
Yeah, and some of what I've heard in the discussion about some of the changes that, say, for Tennessee wants, maybe wouldn't have impacted covenant specifically. Do you view that differently? Because some of the conversation around it is most gun owners that I know, the most fanatical Second Amendment people, really do believe in the importance of storing things safely and recognize that this is a really serious matter. But maybe start with that question first, is that it was covenant just the starter for a movement that was already bubbling below the surface? Or is there something about the changes that would say, no, you don't properly understand it, Spencer, this would have been preventative?
I understand your question. And I'll take it in two parts. The first, the primary tenet that I think would have impacted, and who knows, the outcome of the tragedy that happened at Covenant, the temporary restraining order piece is a crucial one. So I think that the individual who committed this atrocity, their parents knew that that this person was a threat to themselves and potentially to other people, but there was no means to remove firearms. I don't think that they were aware either that firearms were in the person's possession. But so that, I think that if we made it such that folks who are around you, if they considered that you were a threat to yourself or someone else, then there would be a legal procedure by which those firearms could be removed. And again, the background check loophole, I don't, that probably wouldn't have impacted, because I think this was a first-time offender, if memory serves appropriately. So in terms of the origin of Voices for Safer Tennessee, I think the people who founded it, we were all in different levels of engagement on firearm safety more generally. So I wouldn't say, I'm not going to say that it wasn't a catalyst in some way, shape, or form to create something, but I think a lot of folks have been engaged in this discussion already, but we realize that a lot of what's happening, I will not say is ineffective, but we needed a slightly different tack in Tennessee. We're in a supermajority state where a very commonly promoted argument is that it's a slippery slope. If you remove or implement one standard that would make it harder to acquire a gun or even require you to safely store it, it's all down here from there, and we're all going to be living in a 1984 Orwellian novel, and and so be it. And everybody comes to their views of the world in different ways. So I'm not saying that's good, bad, or indifferent. But I will say that's not what we stand for.
Right.
But what Voice for Safer Tennessee, the tack that we were trying to take is make it very Tennessee specific. So we are, by Tennesseans for Tennesseans. We are not. That's not. We've received donations from elsewhere, because a lot of people heard about us, even in Sydney. It was so funny hearing from people and friends in Melbourne. They said, "Is this human chain thing? Was that your friends?" And I said, "Did you see that?" Apparently, it was on the FT. That was interesting.
Yeah, it made international news.
It made international news, but it's also important, that people realize that, yes, this looks very strange from outside the U.S. It looks like a uniquely U.S. problem, and the stats support that as well, which is a tricky. When we talk about the mental health argument, we have the same mental health stats as any other developed nation that's not in a war environment right now, but yet we have this unbelievably metrics-breaking stats on firearm injuries. So back to the original question, how we thought about it. There has not been a truly bipartisan entity focused on this issue ever in Tennessee.
Yeah.
And if it was for veneer. Actually, I literally can't think of one right now. But that was the tack that we were trying to pursue. And I think a lot of us have been involved with Moms Demand before, with Everytown, with all these entities, again, that are focused on creating a safer world for our kids. But their messages, due to whatever, the people involved, who knows, weren't as effective as we wanted to see with our own legislature.
Yeah.
And our own legislature, they're people that we know. They're people that, we grew up with, that we know we have conversations with them where we have more in common than we do distinct. And how can we do this in a real Tennessee way, in a Nashville way? That's what we're trying to do.
One more hard question. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you answering this because, again, the opportunity to have the dialogue just doesn't exist very much, right? Because anyone that is in a position of authority in the state risks a hot mic somewhere, being portrayed, and then before you know it, they're done on either side, right? Whether you're Republican or Democrat, you can't talk about it at all. And so it's just a really valuable format. And I just so thank you for it. The three pillars that you identify, two of them, I think most gun owners can get there pretty quickly to say the safe storage. Anyone that is a gun owner in a meaningful capacity recognizes the importance of how vital it is to have your firearm securely stowed. And secondly, the background check. Like I was seeing stats that, the backlog of having checks run, there's like hundreds of thousands of records that haven't been uploaded into the system. I know a lot of passionate gun owners, and that's not something that they're also really objecting to.
Right.
It's the third
And we did, by the way, get a significant win in the legislature this year with quite a bit of money to reconcile our background check system across counties.
Yeah, crazy for that to be behind.
Building blocks, yep.
It's all about the third one, to say, the moniker associated with it is red flag laws. And the question that I have for you is, a lot of people that are passionate gun owners spent much of COVID and 2020 and all the things afterwards having a lot of fingers pointed at saying, you should do this. Either it's mask wearing, it's vaccination. And there was some really intense language that, as you well know, kind of tore much of the fabric of our nation apart about saying, you're a bad person if you don't do something or not. Yeah. And so I think the deepest fear of a Second Amendment gun owner is that if there's a disagreement that they get in with their neighbor, or if there's some COVID in 2030 where someone is not complying with the law, is that there will be an effort to weaponize the type of law here to say, okay, well, if you're not willing to be vaccinated, then that clearly means you're a crazy person, which means that you should have your guns confiscated.
Interesting.
Okay? So that's the logic train that's there. There may not be an answer in this moment, but I just wonder, with that lead in, what your perspective might be to speak to some of those people that will be listening to this podcast that want to know what the thought to that question would be. Yeah.
Yes. Interesting. So,
and again, thank you for letting me ask.
No, I love it. I love it.
Really
and I actually haven't heard. I literally have not heard that that train of thought yet.
Okay.
And in opposition to that tenant. So, and I'll give you one stat. Interestingly, one of the things that we did with Voices in our early days was commission a poll across the state on the three tenants with primary Republican voters, self-identified primary Republican voters. Interestingly, background checks were, in the upper 70s. The red flag law that you're referencing, also like 73%. The one that dropped a significant amount was safe storage.
Of being in opposition to.
Yes, because they did not want gun owners to be punished in any way. So if someone removed a gun from your car and used it in a violent crime, if it came out that the gun wasn't secured to begin with,
You're
there
liable.
was and it was still a strong majority in support of implementing safe storage, but that truly surprised me because I thought exactly the restraining order piece would be
That's
would
a
be
fascinating
more
thing. Maybe
Yeah.
in the notes for the podcast, we'll link to that
we can
study.
link
Is it publicly
I'd
available?
love that. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I'll,
That would
I'll
be
send
interesting.
I'll send you a bunch of stuff so you can link it for all the data nerds out there that want more info.
You're talking to one. Yeah,
I was
that's
gonna
right.
say,
Yeah.
you have the king amongst data
I'm
nerds.
with
Yeah.
you. I'm like, give me a spreadsheet. I
data.
love it. Pivot
Yeah.
table up. So with that thought, the backstop in our legal system, and again, speaking from my law days 100 years ago, we require due process, period. And it is a big threshold to overcome. So your scenario with, I got in a fight with someone and they said, you would have to prove, for example, to a judge that this person has been determined by, a medical professional that they are, legally unable to make good decisions for themselves, or enough evidence. And, you would have character witness, like the burden is on the person accusing the other individual. So the threshold, I don't ever envisage a world where due process would be, we got in an argument and they said my dog was stupid and so they're crazy. So let me go take their guns. Like that, it's just not in the realm of possibility in our current legal system. But I hadn't heard that argument before, so that's helpful to know.
Yeah, it's a really fascinating framework because I think the COVID era revealed things that this country hasn't seen in a long
Right.
time.
And some worries, some deep-seated worries.
Restrictions on the ability to work and on the ability to travel and to, see your loved one that was dying in the hospital or
God.
giving birth and
Yes.
things that culturally we just had never imagined. And so the two between guns in Tennessee and some of the policies that we saw nationally just I think have gotten linked in a
Shaken
way
people.
that is just a really valuable
That's
discussion.
very interesting.
And so thank you for
No worries. And I think
hearing
and everybody we were really thrown into unprecedented times over COVID, and a lot of people were more alone or with your lovely family who is driving you nuts 24 hours a day. And now I'm doing the math, and I think you guys probably had a young one during that time.
Yeah.
He was 9 months old.
That's intense. Yes. So yay for you. You're still
Yeah.
married. Good
Yeah.
job.
We made it.
Yes. But
Jack Daniels, thank you.
I know exactly. Shout out to the liquor industry. But it was interesting over COVID, and again being told no, like the kids couldn't see their grandparents for 2 years because we couldn't travel internationally, and when we did, my God, I have never seen anything like it. But what was very interesting, and maybe I'm poking this bear, so feel free to scrap it if you need to. But what was fascinating is in Europe, because everyone is living so much closer together all the time, that they were so much more amenable to heavy restrictions. They're like, actually, if it's for the good of society, I'm happy to do it for a certain period. Don't get me wrong. Like London and other places, you weren't allowed to, if you took a walk in the park, to sit down because that was the beginning of a gathering, for example. And I remember talking to my friend who was 7 months pregnant. She's like, I'm trying to get my kids out of the house, and the police officer came up and said, you can't sit down. And I looked at him and I was like, would you like to carry me around Hyde Park?
Oh my God.
But again, you have these things, but she said, but I get it. They don't want people gathering, and you're dealing with a city of 16 million people, and things spread quickly. Anyway, point being, I always observed that if there was something that was kind of for the good of the community in Europe, probably because war and all that stuff is such a more recent memory for them, that they are much more willing to kind of sacrifice some of their individual liberties if it would mean kind of making their neighbors healthier, potentially healthier. Anyway, it's not a monolith. The U.S. is not a monolith. So much of the beauty in our country is the individuality and the unwillingness to, if there's a line, like in the UK, people will gravitate toward the line or a queue. They'll stay in the line. If they see one, they're like, "Whoa, I'll go stand in that. I wonder what it's for." Whereas the US, and my father's Italian, so I can say this, they see a line and they're like, "Oh, that doesn't apply to me." I'll just go to the front. So
what an interesting cultural example. That is a fascinating story.
queue.
You bring a unique perspective of having lived extensive periods of time on both sides of the pond, born in Tennessee, but experiencing it from both perspectives. That's maybe the way to spend the last 10 minutes is I'd love to hear about Fisk and your role on the board there. Fisk has gone through a lot of different transition and change culturally, financially, missional, a lot. So I'd love to just hear an update of how's it doing?
Okay, so Fisk. So I joined the board in April of last year, and we had gone through a president. We were actually actively going through a presidential search at the time that I joined, and Dr. Eugenia Clark is our new president as of, I guess, October of last year. She is a wonder. I mean, if you have not tracked this woman's progress, I encourage you to do so. She blows my mind every time I meet her. So from an entity perspective, an utter coup that we have her at the helm. And
Amazing.
so Fisk has gone through, there's been a lot of, there's been a fair amount of change, but I think that they are continuing to struggle with HBCUs, what HBCUs struggle with across the country. When you're looking at an entity that has a minuscule endowment compared to predominantly white institutions, PWIs, it's a wonder that they can keep the lights on, I will say.
And just for the audience that may not know an HBCU.
HBCU, historically black college and university.
Yeah.
So we'll see, you hear Spelman, Morehouse. We've got a lot that kind of grab the news a lot and are doing just incredible things for a segment of the population that has been overlooked or purposefully sidelined oftentimes. So Fisk is actually the oldest entity of higher education in Middle Tennessee, older than Vanderbilt, which is incredible. And there's so much history there.
I can't believe that trivia stat. I would not have guessed that.
Never have guessed it. And encourage you to look up the background. It will really move you to the court. It was created right after the Civil War, and it just, it blows my mind every time I walk on the campus and I look at how much has happened there from the civil rights movement to more recently we have obviously this incredible art collection, but we're getting all the trains aligned and really going from strength to strength, and we have so many incredible people in the faculty and the board membership and the executive leadership and in the community as well and I'm quoting a friend of mine. He very notably stated a couple of weeks ago that if Fisk isn't doing well, Nashville isn't doing well. So when I was there at commencement a few weeks ago, and the inspiration, seeing all these, they're not children, they're adults. I keep saying kids because they're younger than me.
The older we get, the more they look like children.
They really do. They really do. And just these incredible human beings from all over the world graduating from this institution, and the struggles that they are having to deal with from a day-to-day, nothing compared to my very privileged time at Notre Dame, for example. And they're still just crushing it. So I'm really proud to be part of that entity, and I'm excited to be part of opening the doors a little bit to Nashville. And I'm looking forward to kind of getting more people on campus and checking out the wonder that is Fisk University. So
that's a great update. I just have been interested to learn from someone that's living it, of just what the opportunities are, what the challenges. If you had to give, one or two things that you feel like are opportunities or challenges for Fisk right now, where do you think those might be?
Opportunities or challenges. let's see, I think getting just more further integrated in Nashville. It has been in the backyard for so long, and I think of a lot of the corporations that are moving here, they know about Vanderbilt, they now know about Belmont.
Yeah.
And I want them to know about Fisk
Okay.
as well.
Okay.
And so we're working actively to kind of create some real connective tissue between Amazon, Oracle, all the entities that are here, Asurion.
They're going to be right up the street.
And they're right up the street. I mean, it's so funny because Fisk, due to, our interstate kind of cutting off the Black community to the white community, historically, it's kind of been pushed aside. And it's so interesting to talk to folks, in corporations here. And I talk to them about Fisk and they say, oh, that's right. Where is that place again? I'm like, it's about half a mile from you.
Yeah.
Come and check it out. Yeah.
That's amazing.
And by the way, another growth area for Fisk as an entity, we have an incredible science program and a new entrepreneurial center and focus. So again, kind of leaning into that.
That's my passion.
That's it.
Entrepreneurship.
Great. I'm like, we'll get you over there.
Entrepreneurship contains the power to change communities more than any other thing that I know. It's incredible to see one entrepreneur succeed.
Right.
They rarely forget their roots, and they come back.
You're dead
and they
right.
create jobs. They mentor. They coach, and it really can be transformational for hundreds or thousands of people if you get one.
If you get one.
Yeah.
And again, and high tide lifts all ships. I was thinking about, because one of my VC firms that I was involved with focused on blockchain, and you look at the places where blockchain has really been embraced, and technology and ingenuity. It's been in places where they can't necessarily rely on the current structure. So they have a government or a banking system or a judiciary system that is backwards or rife with bribery or fraud or whatever it is. And so they have to create their own system. And I feel like within the U.S., you can look at communities that have been underrepresented, and they are the source of so much ingenuity, and because they've had to be, and it's inspirational, and we have to pay attention because they cracked a lot of codes. So
I'll just say, before you wrap up, Spence, and all the rest, the thing I hear through your whole story is grit. I just hear that you love to support gritty individuals. You see it in what you're doing in nonprofits. I see it what you're doing at Fisk. I even see it with what you're doing at Safer Tennessee, being willing to have these hard, gritty conversations that no one else will. And I just think the future of our country has to lay in learning how to be gritty.
Agreed.
And how to raise a gritty generation. And so I'm just super impressed by you. And I love
That's
that
really
word
kind.
just kept coming to my head as you talked. It's
my
like, this
gosh.
woman loves grit.
Oh my gosh.
So,
yeah. Give me a
bravo.
problem. I get excited. Yes, I had it with the community foundation. I think somebody popped by my office the other day and they said, "Ooh, like you just got to be swimming in how different this is from the corporate world." I'm like, I love it. Like throw a bucket of noodles on the floor and tell me to sort it out, and that's when I get excited. So, yes, and I don't know. I really appreciate that because I feel like I'm nothing compared to the people that I'm surrounded with. But yeah, if I can do my part to raise them up, I want to do it. So.
I don't know. I think humble grit is the
Yeah.
secret sauce, my friend. So
Well,
keep it up.
work on that.
Katie, thank you for being here. Echoing Carli, it's really great to hear someone that is a very effective communicator. I can see the legal training from the very beginning, and it's interesting how that has been a traced theme through a lot of the things that you've done in your life, of pulling upon that. The cultural perspective that you bring of being able to tell some of the stories that, I had no idea about, some of the things that you've talked about in London, and the experience that you bring is just interesting and particularly appreciated in the dialogue because you have not shied away from controversial areas. And that's important because regardless of whether parties end up coming to the same place of agreement by the end of the discussion, the real travesty is if you can't have the discussion at all, because
Totally agree.
then it's all over. I mean, there's no redemptive
That's right.
outcome.
If there's silence between two people, if marriage is any proxy for this, how we don't solve problems is when we, get in an argument and then just don't talk. You know?
Yes.
That's it just festers. And I think of it, this is a disgusting metaphor, but I used to say it when I was in private equity, and if something went wrong, I was like, hit it right now, like address it right now, because otherwise it's the infected thing that the Band-Aid sits over and it just gets grosser and grosser. Take the Band-Aid off, take a good hard look at it, clean it out, and then move on. Because otherwise it's just going to get worse.
One thing that we love to do, Katie, with every guest is to have them bring something in to reveal a little bit about themselves. So what am I holding here?
You are holding a fine art piece by Violet Buckley. This was my daughter's art piece, and she had read a book, and I actually don't know the name of the book, but it's so sweet. And it was about a little girl that lived in a black and white world, and she wasn't happy with the lack of color, but she didn't know how to bring it. And so she helped a neighbor, I think was the background. And as soon as she helped the neighbor, it created a little flower in the black and white world, which was green and pink. And then the more good things that neighbor did for other people, the more the world started to color. And it reminds me of two things. One, just the power of one person, one act of kindness, how contagious it can be, and how you never know also what people are going through. And two, this is the world that our kids are expecting from us. They're expecting a world of color that is better than what I think that we're potentially going to give them, and we owe it to them. And every day that I'm, sitting in my office or having a hard conversation or coming back from the legislature and just wanting to, slam my head against the wall, I look at this or anything that my kids do, and I'm like, no, you're showing up the next day because we have to. Again, if not us, then who? So thank you, Violet Buckley, for showing us this future of the world. So
I really appreciate that culturally. There's something that Carli and I certainly remember, and it was a product of a culture probably 20 years ago. Do you remember Pay It Forward?
I love Pay It Forward, yeah.
So it kind of took the United States by storm for a period of weeks where people would buy in the drive-through line the meal of the person behind them. And you saw some of these chains that literally the whole thing lasted all day. And it revealed a character of the nation that we haven't seen in a while. And what a great message that I think is captured in that drawing to say,
yes,
regardless of what we believe and where we're at, there's room for that mindset of, hey, let's pay it forward.
That's
and
right.
remember that we're all fellow citizens here in the United States trying to be in a great country.
Yeah, and I'll say one more thing too on the impact of connectivity and helping other people. When we have increasingly common severe weather events, you see the folks who, without even thinking about it, run out their back door to try to help at their own human risk and the lives of people around them as well. They're not asking, are you Democrat or Republican? Who are you planning on voting for? There's neighbors, and they're so excited to help their community, and that is what we're about as Americans, as Tennesseans, as Middle Tennesseans. There's far more that unites us and divides us. So if we can continue to have thoughtful conversations to bring each other together, let's keep doing it. So I appreciate the chance to do that today.
I'll tell Violet she made my day. It's a beautiful, beautiful piece.
Thank you. A piece. I'll tell her that.
Thank you.
Cool.